Hello and welcome to the Brand Therapist podcast. I'm so excited for this session, and I have a few little tips and tricks for you today. So, let's start at the very beginning. So, I wanted to talk about how to get your personal branding on track. And where do you begin? Where do we start? It is the beginning of the year. And so the best thing is, how do we start and where do we start, right? To kind of get our personal brand on track. So the first thing that, we all need to do is understand our brand essence. What is our brand essence? Some of you may already know your brand essence, but if you don't and you're not clear or you want to know the information, is the first thing we want to do is take the quiz. So yes, taking the quiz is a 2-question quiz, really easy, really simple. Once you take the quiz, you can find your brand character, your archetype. Why do we use archetypes? A lot of people ask, can I just do this without archetypes? Yes, you can. Some of you are great at that and probably don't need archetypes to kind of really get you on track. But for those of us who aren't very clear, who really need a little bit more help, archetypes are great. Now, let me tell you what archetypes help me do. So, and I'll tell you my story in a second, but what archetypes help me do for my clients is really understand them at that essence, at that really basic level. And it helps me frame their brand to that character. So when we go to mission, vision, and values, we can use that character to really frame the conversation. Because what happens then? The more we are in character, and this is not about changing your character or being somebody different, it's about understanding your essence so you can be consistent across channels, whether it's, your social media or the way you talk to individuals, making sure that we're on message every single time is really important. So let's talk about archetypes. There's 12 archetypes, right? We have the caregiver, the lover. We have the girl next door good guy. We have the magician, the outlaw, the performer. We have the innocent, the explorer, the hero. And we have the sage, the creator, and the ruler. Those are our 12 archetypes. So once we find what drives us, and that's the first question, what drives you as an individual, as a human being, right? So there's 4 major drivers of human behavior. The first one is, are you more on the stable side? Or are you more on the dynamic side? Are you more about belonging and connecting? Or are you more independent? Once you find out what your major, now I didn't say we don't have a little bit of all of these, but what's your major driver of human behavior? Then we have 3 quotes that get you to your archetype. And you're going to be connected to more of one quote versus the other. And if there's 2 that kind of you're connected to, select the number 1 that you're most connected to. So then that gives you a brand character, an archetype. And then what do you do after that? Okay, great. I have my archetype. You can do some research, you can find out. But what I have for you today is really exciting. I created a brand therapist workbook. So you can either have that archetype and really get deep into it. And I'll tell you a little bit of what that includes. I've created about a 35 page workbook that you can get really in depth with and gives you ideas and examples of how to specifically get that character and show that consistency across channels. The other thing that it does, it gives you your super fan. If you're a specific archetype, that super fan is the opposite of that archetype. What I call your ideal client, your avatar, whatever words is better for you. So really understanding that super fan and making sure you're attracting your super fan and messaging accurately to your super fan is one of the most important things to really get your brand into a great place. Okay, so I now that you know how to find your brand character, how to find your archetype, what do? You can also go take the quiz at bespokebranding.io. BESPOKE branding.io and click on the top right button of the screen. There's the brand quiz. 2 questions and find out who your character is. Okay, that's a really simple way. So once you find that, you can go on Amazon. All the books are on Amazon and look for Brand Therapist Workbook. And once you find your character, you can say, okay, am I the caregiver? Am I the girl next door? Am I the lover? And pick which workbook is perfect for you. And then that is when you go into the 25 pages. Now, I made it really affordable. You can get the Kindle version at $7.77, or you can get the actual workbook for 20 bucks. And it's really comprehensive, but I want to go into kind of what the workbook has so you have an understanding of what you should be working on when you have the answer, because having the answer is not taking action. Having the answer is really going through and understanding each of the different positions. So the first one is brand archetype analysis. So that's when you explore the archetype traits that align with your brand's identity and understand how these archetypes can influence your brand character. Then we go into personality traits. We're going to take a deep dive into personality traits that define your brand. And we're going to examine how these traits impact your brand's interactions and relationships with customers. It also helps you define your values. These personality traits should be taken on as values and really express your values through your personality traits. The next piece is values and beliefs. You're going to identify now the personality traits will give us that base, but the values and beliefs, you can really go deep into defining your values, your core values. Now, we don't need to have 10, 20, 30 values. It's really about defining those 3, 4 values for yourself and taking action against those values and learn how to communicate the values to your audience. The fourth one is voice and tone guidelines. This is really important. A lot of people use tone of voice guidelines. How does this work for you? And at a basic level, if you understand your tone of voice, this is how you communicate out, whether it's social media or newsletters. But the other thing that this can help you with is you can hire people to do those things for you and maintain your tone of voice. Have you ever been afraid to kind of hire a social media expert to do your social media because they're not going to really get you and know how to do your particular messaging? Well, once you do tone of voice and you go through that exercise, you can send them your tone of voice so they can stay on track. So there are guidelines for your brand's communication style, right? And including the appropriate language when to use those. The fifth one is the visual identity integration. Now, a lot of what I do in my job when I create logos and websites and templates is I use the archetype to define the visual integration. And so it's going to give you some ideas around how to think about color, how to think about all your visual assets for this particular archetype. The six is really important, storytelling strategies. So, as a particular archetype, whether you're a hero or a lover, you're going to find out how you can communicate and tell stories and what are the strategies for those stories for each of the different archetypes. The seventh is audience alignment. This is where we really get deep with your super fan, right? Understanding your opposite, understanding that person that is attracted to you is one of the most important things. Understanding how we communicate, and the number one thing, build tension. I've talked about building tension before, but this is how you start building tension, is through the opposite communication. So you want to communicate to your opposite, but you don't want to lose your personal brand. So building that tension within your personal brand and that opposite is how we start to really understand tension. And what does tension do for us? Why do I want to use tension? Why is tension important? Well, tension is important because it helps us grow as individuals. Just like we're trying to get to purpose, right? Understand what our purpose is in this world. Building tension gets us closer to understanding that opposite, which is always going towards our purpose. All right, then we have differentiation. This is key, right? How do you differentiate from all your competitors, from people who do similar things than you do? The way that we differentiate is through our character. So, discovering how your brand character differentiates you from your competitors is key. So, we learn how to leverage that competitive advantage. And being our own unique self and understanding that essence is the beginnings of really differentiating ourselves from the crowd. Consistency across channels. Now, this is really important. You might have a website or, your LinkedIn versus your Instagram, your TikTok. How do you make sure you have different things going in the different channels, but you maintain the consistency across them? So it really helps you understand within your particular archetype how to do that. And the last one is evolution and growth. Once we've covered all of those and we're really clear on what that is, then we go on to what's the next level? What's the next thing I need to do? And how can I achieve that within my character and my brand character and my archetype? So this is the Brand Therapist Workbook. I'm really excited to have a workbook that you can really get an understanding and work through. Now, it's a lot of information, so make sure you take it by little chunks and work through it and understand it. And you can do this for yourself and have an amazing, amazing brand by, maybe you can say the second quarter of 2024, which I'm really, really excited for you. So don't forget, Brand Therapist Workbook on Amazon. You go to the quiz first, bespokebranding.io, find out your brand character. The book has it too, so you can just buy the book and find out through the book as well. Or you can do the Kindle version, which is a really inexpensive version, and you can go through it at your own pace. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Thank you for joining me on the Brand Therapist podcast. And I can't wait to hear what your brand archetype is and to understand how it's evolved in your business. And not just your business, but your personal brand, which is something we always want to work on to leave a legacy. So thank you and see you on the next show.